Borderless Talks. It's brought to you by Serviap Global.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Borderless Talks, a monthly podcast where we explore global work dynamics with international business leaders. This podcast brought to you by Serviap Global. I'm your host, Wagner Mendler, and this is episode 3. Today, we'll speak with Zain Ali, CEO of Centuro Global, a platform-based, all-in-one solution for international business. Zain, welcome to the show, and please feel free to introduce yourself, man.
Thank you for having me, Wagner. Very happy to be here. So, as you said, I'm Zain Ali. I'm the CEO of Centuro Global. I'm a lawyer by background turned founder. And now we have an all-in-one platform supporting businesses with immigration, tax, employment law, and entity setup worldwide, and looking to use technology and AI to disrupt the global mobility industry.
That's amazing, man. I'm so happy to have you here. And can you please explain to us a little bit more about, how Centuro Global was launched, how it helps scale apps and corporates expand globally?
Yeah, sure. So as I touched upon, I'm a lawyer. So I started my career working for a big international law firm. And we worked with a mixture of clients, large multinationals, but also kind of fast growing tech companies. So one of my first ever clients actually was, it was 2012. I was told we've got a company from the US that is a taxi company. They're looking to set up in the UK. Can I research London and the UK's taxi regulations? So I started doing research, trying to figure out how this company can launch in the UK. And over time, we kind of discovered it's a big known brand. So it was Uber. No one knew them at the time. Not everyone had a smartphone. The concept of a marketplace mobile application didn't really exist. Gig workers. So Uber, are the drivers employees? Are they freelancers? Do they need a license? Are they a taxi company or are they just a mobile app that connects people? There are all these questions that had to be answered. So that was my first kind of exposure to international expansion. And I then went on to manage a lot of large multinationals. And from a, junior level, I was quite fortunate where I was interacting with general counsel and HR and senior leaders in big companies trying to help them manage cross-border operations. And what I quickly discovered was it's incredibly complex. You need to think about employment law. You need to think about corporate law, tax, immigration, IP, data protection. And the laws are different in every single country. And even though I was working for a big international law firm, we had 30-ish offices around the world. And we also worked with local firms and advisors in different countries. And we were amalgamating all of that advice, putting it into Excel spreadsheets, then advising the client. And I just thought this is expensive, it's inefficient, super complicated. How can we use technology to simplify this? And that's where the idea for Centuro came about. So I took those learnings and I thought, it doesn't matter if you're a fast growing tech company or if you're an existing large multinational, you need support in these different complex areas. So imagine you had a platform where you can access advice at the click of a button. You can use AI to get really tailored and bespoke information on your business around complex rules and regulations in different countries. And then you can request services, and it doesn't matter how many suppliers you're using. The platform is the single central point to access all advice and immigration services, tax services, entity setup, and employment law all in one place. So that was the vision and what we built at Centuro. So we started building this in 2020, just literally a month before lockdowns and COVID. Started building out the product, building a team. We had to build a remote team from day one because that was the state of play with global lockdowns and coronavirus. Which actually helped us grow fast. Started onboarding customers, getting them testing the products. And because most people are not used to buying the product, they're looking for immigration services, tax services, corporate law services. We're trying to expand. We had to educate the market that this is a new way of doing things. But because the pain point was so real, we kind of had quite quick adoption early on, which has kind of led us today to be kind of 4.5, nearly 5 years into the journey. Building this modern compliance solution.
Yeah, this is a fantastic story. And it's interesting to see how companies, after COVID, after the pandemic, they are looking more closely to global expansion and, where they can hire teams abroad. How can they be more cost efficient, for example? But usually they have no idea how to do that. Like, they want to expand to a specific market, but they don't know which one is the best, like in terms of how does it compare to their labor laws or international laws? How can they really do it? Do they need an entity? How fast can they open an entity? how can they compare? Like, okay, if I want to open an entity in Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, for example, which one will be faster? So yeah, it's incredible what AI can do today. And, to have this streamlining the platform to really assist those companies on the decision-making process to make sure that things are more, are fast and reliable. And about the AI platform-based solutions itself, how do you interpret this trendy shift in global work from companies offering standalone services to companies promoting holistic platforms?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think when you look at this particular industry and you're talking about international business, it is extremely complex. And when you're trying to manage immigration, HR, tax, payroll, the questions you just raised, do we set up an entity? How quickly can we do it? Do we use employer record? All of these different things, it can feel like you're juggling a lot. And what AI is very good at is taking a lot of, if you look at the whole concept of large language models, it's taking a lot of heavy data and simplifying. And so having one platform where you can not just gather data, but then also manage services across multiple areas, rather than have them standalone, it becomes really inefficient, becomes really costly. So if you can combine that all in one system, that makes it incredibly attractive and creates a lot of efficiencies and cost savings.
Perfect. And about the AI itself, like with usually companies, when they look for help in terms of their expansion, of course, they want the data, they want the information, but usually they want like the human side of things, like the human aspect of the HR. So with AI powered solutions, chatbots, software, how is it possible to really streamline the processes without losing this human touch, this human side of an HR related company?
Yeah, I think we can't lose the human touch. I think the human touch is incredibly important. It's in the name, human resources, so you're looking after people. And we talk a lot about AI, and I think the beauty of AI is that it can really streamline a lot of administrative areas, a lot of inefficient areas that take a lot of time. And where you utilize AI in the right way and you use it to streamline all of those areas, that frees up the time to focus on the human element to offer more support to employees. I think there is an element of AI where you have AI avatars now, and like you said, chatbots, and if some of them are incredibly realistic, and the technology is moving so fast that maybe in a year they'll be really super realistic where you won't even be able to tell the difference. So the question then becomes, if the technology advances that fast, what is the difference between an AI avatar and a real human? But I think today, as far as we can see, the human aspect, the empathy, all of that you can't really replace. Like AI is incredibly intelligent, but it's effectively processing tons and tons of information and then putting words in front of each other to then present what it thinks is best. It's not actually real empathy. So I think there's a delicate balance where you can use AI to streamline a lot of administrative and inefficient processes. And then that frees up time for humans to do what humans do best and be people and interact and support your employees with that human element.
Yeah, definitely. Usually when I talk to customers here, I like to mention that we have technology at our side, like we have the platform. So in our case, the HR platform, so they can manage the employees and have access to the data. So transparency to manage their global teams, but they also have a human being that's ready to help them if they need. So of course, if you need a more, I would say, a prognostic, or if you need a specific answer to a simple question, AI chatbots, they're great. But sometimes they want someone to talk to so they can reach a decision, or they can explain a little bit more of a problem, and they want to have this whole context and concept, given to the conversation. So it's always good to know that you have this human touch, as you mentioned. It should be obvious, like it's human resources, but we see that this is something that happens a lot, especially in companies that they offer like very low pricing solutions. So it's very hard to have like a good service level in this case.
Yeah, just to jump in, I agree. I think, at Centuro specifically, we've built, AI agents that can help make decisions, and we have AI chatbots. But at every stage, there's a human element. So you can press a button to get human verification. You can press a button to talk to a human. And I think, like what you just said there, you're not going to get the highest quality advice when it comes to complex scenarios without that human intervention. And I think also at the stage we're at today, it has advanced so quickly, but there's still an element of trust issues where people think, okay, we can use this and it's great for certain things, but we're not going to trust it for legal advice, compliance advice. And you have to have that human step in at that point. And, that's exactly what we do at Centuro. We've got tech to, enhance things, but at the end of the day, it's the human expertise and that's going to give you that quality.
Yeah, I do. I firmly believe that what really differentiates is a specialist, like a human being, like specialist in specific solution. It's not exactly, the knowledge in terms of the data, but it's how he interprets the data. Because, if not, I can just open like a chat GPT or anything, ask for, how to perform a surgery. I can go on and perform myself. The information is there, but I'm not an expert. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to take this information and really put into context about the situation, So yeah, and I know that the internet itself and governments, they are trying to do some kind of a AI regulation. So what do you see in the future of AI regulation? So for example, for companies such as the EU AI Act, how can business better navigate that?
Yeah, I think AI regulation is actually very important. So I'm in a pretty unique position because I'm a lawyer, but I'm also the founder of a business. So as a lawyer, you work around regulations and you see them as important. As a founder of a business, you want to innovate and you don't want regulations to restrict your ability to innovate. So for me, I think with AI, it is developing so quickly and it's got the potential, or it already is so powerful, that we have to have regulation. And I think historically, lawmakers, regulators, they're always slow. And whenever technology advances, by the time the regulation comes out, the technology has advanced so much further that the regulations even make sense. So I think with the EU AI Act, for example, that's come out at a pretty good time. It came out this year, AI has been around for a long time, but large language models have only become kind of common language and mass uptake since ChatGPT launched, and then tons of other tools have come out in the past 2 years. So I think the EU AI Act has come out at a good time, and they've designed it in a way where there's 2 years for companies to start complying with it. And in those 2 years, it allows people to see how does this regulation work in practice and then propose amendments to make it practical. So I think as long as, businesses who are trying to develop things and innovate have a kind of close communication line with policymakers, I think that's super important because it's got to be a two-way dialogue. It has to be a case of there's a risk with AI. You get deep fakes, for example. There's risks around privacy, data protection, intellectual property. And those are serious things that can impact a business as well as individual humans on a consumer basis. And that is important to have regulations to protect that. But at the same time, businesses need to have the freedom to come up with new ideas, test things, try things. Things may go wrong. There may be mistakes. So there has to be a balance. So I think governments and regulators need to have close dialogue with, business owners, companies, to strike that balance. And it has to be fluid. You can't just say, these are the law, these are the regulations, stick to it. We've got to see how it works in practice and how it evolves over time.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. The regulation usually, it comes to answer to a problem that's already happening. So it's like you said, the problem already happened. So the regulation is trying to solve an old problem. And by the time it solves, there are new problems as well. And of course, no one wants like a Terminator Skynet. So we need to regulate things. But yeah, totally agree with you. And about Centuro, specifically, Centuro's AI-driven platform, how do you ensure this adaptability to the unique needs of, businesses in different industries or regions?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we have our own proprietary data set. So we have a ton of data on compliance requirements in pretty much every country in the world. And we keep that regularly up to date. And we do it in a few ways. So one, we have a kind of a team that are dedicated to content and data, and they're constantly fact checking everything. The second way is we have an AI research tool, actually. So the AI we have certain key websites, government websites, etc., that we've highlighted that we can pull instant updates from. And that makes sure, we're never we're never too far out of date. We're ahead of the game in terms of making sure our content stays up to date. And when we've got that volume of data and we're keeping it regularly up to date and we're fact checking it with experts, that enables us to really have a strong data set where the AI can pull out the differences between different countries, the different nuances. And what's also interesting is because we're not just a tech company, we also provide services. We have an in-house team of, immigration experts, tax experts, lawyers, and so on. So when we're giving clients advice, we're not just giving by the book advice, we're giving commercial advice, and we're looking at nuances between countries, regions, strategic kind of elements. And we can take that, obviously anonymized. We remove any personal data, but we take those strategic commercial nuances and put them into our AI. So we end up with a really powerful data set and advisory AI chatbots and AI agents where other platforms wouldn't have that because they're just pulling information off the internet. Some of that information is out of date, some of it's in date, and some of it conflicts in different ways. Whereas all of ours is really curated by experts. So that's where it makes it quite unique.
Yeah, perfect. So I believe that this answered the question of how do you balance the predictive analytics in your platform with the unpredictability and fluidity of global compliance regulations, because we're talking about regulations and compliance regulations. And it's a fast-paced changing scenario. So it must be quite hard to keep, everything updated. So you can offer the best solutions.
Yeah, I think if you think about life without AI, all we're doing is enhancing things with AI. We're not saying AI is perfect. We're not saying predictive analytics are perfect. Predictive analytics recognizes patterns and it starts to help you predict what's going to come next based on this series of patterns. It doesn't mean that's exactly what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, humans are the decision makers. And for us to be able to make decisions, we need as much information as possible, and pattern recognition helps enable us to make those decisions. So the way we see it is AI is a massive value add. It's not something you should rely on its own and just say, that's what this says, this is what's going to happen. You rely on it. You look at the information. Things are changing at a fast pace. Things are also imperfect, and things that make sense in theory don't always work in practice. And that's again where humans stand out, because we can kind of have that flexibility and fluidity and use kind of human experience and expertise to make those decisions. So I think AI is just enhancing the ability to make better decisions.
Yeah, that's perfect. I really agree with you. And so can you share a success story where your platform helped a company to enhance the process and, improve in a sense in a scenario that would be challenging or very time intensive through traditional methods?
Yes. So there's so many actually. I'm trying to think which is the best one to share. Okay, we had one tech company who they did a big Series B fundraise. They were looking to expand into 3 markets in Latin America. They'd already made their decision on which countries they wanted to expand to. They came to us and they were 100% set on where, but the question was how. And typically they would have to engage with consultants, market entry experts, lawyers, accountants, maybe an employer of record company, and they would have to consider all the different options. Do we set up an entity? What's the order we do it in? Can we get people on the ground? Do we start with EOR and then shift to an entity? I mean, all the different considerations. And then there's industry regulations. What licenses do we need? What things do we need to think about from a compliance perspective, contracts? And when you're using so many different providers, that could be several months of manual research. It could be incredibly expensive to gather all that advice. And it's only after you've done the research and gathered the advice that you can then make decisions and start executing. And then that execution piece, then that takes months as well. So we had this company, they came to us, they used our platform, they used our AI and data tools to start the planning. And instead of it taking, let's say 3 months, they were able to do all of their data gathering and planning within 2 weeks, including human support on all of those different areas. Now at Centuro, we specialize in immigration, tax, entity setup and employment law, but then we have partners such as Serviap for employer of record, for payroll, and we're able to plug partners like you in to streamline that whole process for customers. So that particular client, they were able to get data and prepare their reports and pitch internally and present their their decks. We have a market entry playbook generator, for example. So you can log into our platform, you pick a country, you describe your business and your plans, and within 3 seconds, you now have a bespoke market entry playbook that tells you what your entity options are, how to set up employment laws and so on. And for every slide of the playbook, we have an AI chatbot where you can ask it questions and get more advice. And then you can flip it and say, I want a human now. And that at your fingertips is so much powerful compared to writing to a law firm, waiting for a response, having a call, describing your problem, them going away, spending a month writing the report, sending it back to you, you reading it, and then processing it and so on. So we managed to help this company, launch in all 3 markets within 6 months. So they did the planning, then it was the execution. Our team were able to kind of help execute and plug in all the services for those 3 countries. And they'd estimated it would take 12 to 18 months to do it, and we helped them do it in 6 months.
Yeah, this is awesome. And this also translates to, money, cost efficiency. So, time really is money, especially when we're talking about global expansion. That is also why one of the amazing methods of expanding is to use like EOR services. Lots of companies, they want to open their own entities, and it's advisable, and it's something that we love to help companies to do. That's why we have partners such as Centuro Global. And in the meantime, of course, Serviap can assist, as you mentioned, with the EOR services, so they can test out the market. They can start, building their teams while they are in the process of opening the entity, of doing all the documentation. So this is something that's pretty great. I understand that today, companies, they can start growing very fast, and the global mobility is amazing solution that we have, and that our solutions combined can help companies to expand. And in a matter of weeks, they can be exploring the markets. And as you mentioned, in a matter of months, they can have their setup over there.
Yeah, that's the beauty of employer of record companies like Serviap. I think you guys are really able to bring that speed to market entry. What we handle at Centuro is typically historically takes longer to get done, and we're speeding that up. The employer of record, that helps companies get into markets even quicker whilst they're doing most of that planning. So I think, like you say, these sorts of partnerships, it's very complementary, and it works well to give clients the best solutions.
Yeah, for sure. And about like global mobility, what do you think are the biggest tips and challenges for beating policy changes like in foreign countries?
For beating policy changes, I think it's not about beating policy changes. I think it's actually more about staying ahead of them. And I think policies change so often, laws change so often. If you look at 2024, there were over 70 elections around the world. In 2025, more countries are having elections. You've got big shifts in immigration and global mobility policies. In the UK, it became more expensive this year for companies to bring in skilled workers. The minimum salary increased by 48%, I believe. Donald Trump is coming in. He's going to be inaugurated in January for the US. We're going to have to wait and see what happens, but obviously he's got pretty strong views on immigration and, doing things more internally in the US and making America great again. So there are a lot of kind of challenges and policy shifts that continuously happen. So I think the number one tip really is to stay informed. So companies need to just always be looking at what's happening, looking at potential risks, maybe scenario planning. So, before the US election, if Trump wins, is this going to happen? If Kamala had won, what would have happened? And being ready in advance. So I think the earlier you can kind of keep on top of different trends, the better. And then if you've got relationships with local experts, whether they're lawyers, tax specialists, EOR specialists, or even government policymakers, having relationships with local compliance experts, that can help you really go deeper and understand those changes. And I guess the third point is more on operational level. So at Centuro, we have a platform. We talked about the data, how we keep everything up to date. So we like to be ahead of those trends. And so really, I would say the secret for companies is, instead of being reactive, try and be proactive. You can combine real-time data, local expertise, and then a strong operational foundation to really turn policy challenges actually into opportunities. Because you can get ahead of the curve and say, okay, this is happening here. We can make decisions in advance. Maybe we shift our priorities over there. So yeah.
Yeah. And now that the pandemic itself is mostly over, at least that's what we want. We are seeing the effects of, return to the office mandates, in terms of international collaboration, cost benefits and compliance. What do you think about that? Like how this puts a little bit more complexity into the scenario?
Yeah, it is complex. I think if you think about it, 2020, 99% of the world went remote. And that was a major shift. And I think most people were remote for at least 2 years, or at least 1 to 2 years. And then 2022, we started having a slight shift towards hybrid. And, now we're seeing massive companies having these return to office mandates 5 days a week, and it's a complete shift. And I think when you think certain people have made decisions to relocate, whether it's move states, move country, businesses even expanded where they hired from. So they were hiring people from overseas. They were using employer of record to do that. And for those companies to now shift to, you have to be in the office, that raises a lot of questions. So who has to be in the office? If they have hired people in different jurisdictions, what does that mean for them? Is it a local office? Do they need to relocate country? For people in countries like the US, where there are different states and each state has their own tax regulations, what happened to people who move state? Are you now going to require them to pack up their bags and move back into your state? There's so many implications to it where businesses have to kind of do that cost benefit analysis. They might argue, we have our own data that shows that people in the office are more productive. I haven't seen that data publicly published anywhere, but it could be on an individual business case basis that I think we are more productive in the office. And if that means we lose certain employees because they refuse to come back, then so be it. It's better for us in the long term. That could be their decision. On the flip side, you could be losing really good talent. That talent attrition could be a massive risk. You could also be losing out on great talent that is not within your vicinity. My personal perspective is there is no one size fits all. There is no perfect solution. I think in certain scenarios, it is better to have people in the office. Maybe, for example, sales teams, like the energy you get from being around each other, the learning you get from, overhearing each other's calls, bouncing those ideas off whilst they're fresh, and having that camaraderie is quite important. But on the flip side, there are other roles where you don't have to be together and you can easily work remotely. Then on a personal level, some people have families and they want that flexibility to be able to juggle family life. So there's so many different considerations. I don't think there's a one size fits all. But I think, mandating return to office 5 days a week in 2024 and 2025, it could be difficult. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, definitely. We saw a lot of this happening here, for example, because for when everything happened, COVID, pandemic, and everybody went remote, as you mentioned, it was not something that happened throughout like 1 month or 2 months. It was years. So there were people who really adapted to the scenario. They moved from their houses, they went to live in other cities, for example. So here we have people that they went to live in country houses instead of staying in the big city or the central cities. So when the companies, they try to say, hey, now you're going to have to be on site again, they are thinking like, okay, so how can I do that? I'm now like 4 or 5 years, on this of distance from the company. It's a 5-hour drive. So companies, they needed to adapt a little bit. A part of the office went hybrid. Some other people stayed remote. So yeah, I do believe that we will have to see this kind of flexibility from both sides, like a win-win situation. So if there's a way for you to be in the office, like on a hybrid sense, like 1 or 2 times a week, that's great. If not, you can stay remote. But if you want to retain talent, you're gonna have to be flexible. If not, you're gonna lose talent, as you mentioned. So that's for sure. And one thing that we see happening a lot here, and are companies that, for example, they want to expand to other countries. So let's just say that a company wants to expand to US, but they want to send someone from their home countries to manage the team. So visas and immigration. So they need someone to sponsor the visa. They need someone to deal with the immigration process. What are the common mistakes that you see from companies when they are dealing with this immigration process, supporting for internationalization of their own employees and expats?
Yes, good question. I think there are several mistakes a lot of companies make. I think probably one of the biggest is underestimating timelines. So I think,
For sure.
depending on the scenario, immigration processes can often take a lot longer than anticipated. So some countries have really complex systems, or they have quotas, and there's only so many people that can go in. Or you mentioned the US, they have a particular route, the H-1B, where it's a lottery. And so there's a lot of careful planning that you need to do. And if you need, a lot of businesses say, we need somebody in a month. And then you look at the profile and you're thinking, okay, there might be some short-term solutions, but it's going to be very difficult to get them the right work permit in a month, for example. So I think better planning around timelines is very important. I think second mistake is a lot of companies have policies and they think they have to stick to them. But immigration is different from country to country, and it's very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all type of policy and a uniform approach. You have to have a bit of fluidity, and I think when you're fixed and rigid, that can result in errors or you don't take the right advice on. What else? I would say employee experience is important. And I think a lot of HR are obviously very thoughtful about the employee experience. But sometimes when you're kind of dealing with immigration, people think, oh, we need to get this person into this country to help run our business or launch this office. But you might forget there's a human who's moving. Maybe they have a family. They're, relocating to another country is quite a major life move and decision. And you need to support them on that journey and help them settle in and have a great experience to help them be in the best position to be able to help you grow your business. So I think, it's important not to ignore that whole employee experience. And then finally, I would say once somebody is in the country, you've got the work permit, you actually need to remember it's an ongoing process. So if you overlook the post-visa compliance, there are ongoing obligations, there are renewals, you've got to maintain records for audits. It doesn't just end there. So I think that is one mistake some kind of younger companies or companies who are expanding for the first time don't realize, and they just think, oh, we've got the work permit, we're done. And they leave it at that. So I would say those are pretty much the main mistakes that companies make.
Yeah, perfect. Couldn't agree more, especially with the timeline. Like companies, they are really unaware of how long can it take, to get the visa process completed. Because of course we need to rely on the government, and we need to rely on responses that are beyond our reach and our power, we cannot control. So totally agree. And what do you see, as the biggest benefits of global mobility services overall?
Biggest benefits, global mobility services. So one is really access to talent. So I think if you want to hire people, there are statistics that suggest that by 2030, there's going to be a skills shortage of 85 million jobs. So it doesn't matter what the industry is, whether you're a tech company and you're looking for AI talent, or you're a construction company and you're looking for engineers, or whatever it is, you're not necessarily going to have all of the talent you need at your disposal in your country or in your vicinity. So with global mobility, that enables you to bring the people you need in from anywhere in the world, regardless of where they are. And that helps you stay competitive in a kind of globalized economy. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits, access to talent. But also, it's not just about hiring and bringing people over. It's also about, seconding existing employees to help train people or to help launch an office, like you said earlier, and bringing their expertise in to help you grow. So that can kind of lean into the market expansion aspect as well. So it simplifies that entry where you're not just hiring new people that, you've never worked with. You're bringing existing people to the new market to then hire, instill that culture, the learnings, and help you grow your business. And then I think something that people don't really talk about very often is actually international moves can be used as a retention strategy. So some employees want to experience living abroad. They want to experience life in another country. So if you move them, whether it's for 6 months, 12 months, whether it's just a common just to experience life there, whether it's to work on a project, not only are they taking their expertise to where they're going, but they're also going to learn from that local office and bring it back. And then they will have enhanced employee satisfaction and have more loyalty to you as a company and stay longer. So I think that's another key benefit of global mobility services.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I do believe that in most of the companies and to most of the employees, being, if your company can provide to you such an experience as working internationally, getting to know or to live abroad, this can get the employees a huge benefit. And of course, it impacts a lot the retention as well. And to wrap up our conversation, man, with how the whole political and economic changes around the world, what strategies do you recommend for companies to kind of future-proof their global mobility plans?
Well, it's a big question.
That's why it's a wrap-up. It has to be a big question.
Big question for the round. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but I think scenario planning is one of the most important things. So, if you can, as a business, model out what you think some of the geopolitical impacts are going to be. And I mean, if you look at 2024, for example, it's been a turbulent year. So many different things have happened. We've mentioned the elections. There's been, wars that have been taking place for a couple of years now that don't seem to be ending, potentially escalating further in the Middle East. So we already have data on the impact of some of these things. So what it is companies need to do is look at 2025 and beyond and say, okay, what else might happen? It kind of goes back to the point of predictive analytics. Start to make predictions. These are the patterns we've seen. What's going to happen next? If A happens, or if B happens, or if C happens, what are our strategies? What are we going to do? Do we have contingency plans? In terms of politics, there seems to be a lot of kind of anti-immigration sentiment around the world. But at the same time, like I said earlier, there's a talent shortage, and it's how do you balance, anti-immigrant sentiment, whether it's to do with illegal migration versus skilled migration. So there's a lot of scenario planning that needs to be done. I think secondly, companies need to kind of invest in their compliance infrastructure. And what that really means is you need to be on top of what's happening. So if you're going to do this scenario planning, you need to then be on top of or ahead of the game in terms of what changes are coming, what policies are going to, or rules are going to change, and be able to monitor those and be able to react or be proactive as opposed to reactive. Again, like I said earlier. And then another theme that we both mentioned is flexibility. So companies just have to be nimble. You have to be flexible. You have to be able to adapt to things that are going to happen, and you have to be able to adapt to your workforce, because people at the end of the day are humans, and they're unpredictable, and they have different personalities, and they have different needs. That employee experience and that satisfaction when relocating, I think there has to be a lot more emphasis on that and helping people settle in. I can't remember the exact data, but there's data that shows that companies spend around $1 million on moving an individual overseas, and a significant number of those people leave the company within a couple of years because they didn't have a good experience. So that's a massive expenditure and a massive loss that companies are facing when doing this. There are so many benefits. You just need to do it right. I think those are some of the things that companies can do to kind of future-proof themselves.
Amazing tips, man. And I love the way you brought to adapt. Because at the end of the day, evolution is all about that, isn't it? The ones who better adapt to the scenario are the ones that survive. This one goes to humans, animals, and companies, so we're all at the same boat. So that's amazing, man. Thanks a lot. So Zain, thanks for your time, man. We're so happy that you can join us and to bring all of your expertise to the table. And tell, where can people contact you, follow you, see a little bit more about your work?
Thank you very much, Wagner. I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for having me on here. If anybody wants to find me, connect, LinkedIn's probably the best place. So just search my name, Zain Ali, Centuro Global. I should pop up. Happy to kind of interact with anyone who's interested in continuing any of the discussion points we've had today.
Sure. Amazing. I'm pretty sure that you helped a lot of people with this conversation today. So thanks everyone for watching. I'm Wagner Mendler. Thanks for listening to this episode of Serviap Borderless Talks. It's brought to you by Serviap Global. You can follow Serviap Global on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for a new episode of Borderless Talks every month. And I see you next time. Thanks everyone. And thanks Zain again.
Borderless Talks. It's brought to you by Serviap Global.
Serviap Global.